asking those questions, and we're going to do our best to answer those for you later in the show. And of course, a reminder that directly after the word on Woodward at 2:00, we've got Hockeytown Trivia on the District Detroit mobile app. But I'll remind you guys again about that at the end of the show. Again, that is 2 p.m. in the District Detroit app for Hockeytown Trivia. And like I said, we've got a jam-packed show today. So without further ado, let's bring in my co-host, Art Regner. Art, how are you doing on this fine Thursday afternoon?
I'm doing well, Danielle. I feel good, excited. I mean, we're doing the word on Woodward, and I'm ready to go. A lot of great guests, and I'm looking forward to, talking to my all-time favorite broadcaster, Ken Cal. So it's a good day.
I'm glad Ken already got the chance to call you out in our pre-production meeting when you said that, because I think on Tuesday you said Dan Dickerson was your favorite broadcaster.
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, I know how the game is played, so whomever we're talking to is my all-time favorite. You've got to make them feel good and comfortable about themselves.
Hopefully Dan's listening to that too, and he doesn't take too much offense to it. But Art, I know there is. Art, I know there's a subject that we're both kind of really excited to talk about because we've got some more news when it comes to the NHL restart option. So let's get into our big three presented by Chevy. And as I mentioned, that first topic, last night the news kind of broke in evening into the night, and it seems like there was a meeting and Gary Bettman kind of said that they're ready to complete the regular season and they really want to do that. And they're pegging July for the start time. And originally they were talking about playing at neutral sites around the country that might not be NHL arenas, but they kind of nixed that. It looks like it's going to be 4 NHL arenas. They would hope to do it divisionally, but I think the main focus is making sure that it's not COVID-19 hotspots.
Well, exactly. I mean, I thought it was rather interesting. All kinds of reports came out. There were several different stories. Gary Bettman talked to Ron McClain on Sportsnet. And they also had a meeting among general managers and and what happened is exactly that, what we thought. They're going to try to get this season in some way, shape, or form. They want to go to 4 separate venues. I know the venues that were mentioned, one for each division would be Edmonton in the Pacific, Minnesota in the Central, Raleigh, North Carolina in the Metropolitan. And then the Atlantic was kind of up in the air because if you look at it, almost every market in the Central, in the Atlantic Division are huge metropolitan areas. So I was under the impression, well, maybe it'll be Buffalo. I was kind of leaning towards Ottawa just because of the COVID-19 cases. And Larry Brooks of the New York Post comes out last night, writes a column and says that they're thinking Florida, either Florida or Tampa Bay is where the Atlantic Division may end up. And what's really interesting about that, I think the best arena for the Central Division would be Little Caesars Arena. There's 2 sheets of ice. Teams are going to have to practice. They want to do like a 3-day, 3 games back to back to back. It has 4 major league locker rooms. And plus the locker rooms for the Little Caesars teams, and those are pretty lavish as well. So it is the ultimate facility for this. Unfortunately, we have the 3rd highest caseload of COVID-19 cases in the entire country. That probably won't happen, but I do have an idea. I want to run this by you. I think that if the Pistons and the NBA allow for the teams to use all 4 major league locker rooms, obviously the Red Wings room, the visitors room, the NBA visitors room, and the Pistons room, which probably won't happen, but let's just say it does. I think we should allow the Toronto Maple Leafs and the entire Canadian press the visitors NBA locker room where the Utah Jazz were the last team to harbor in there. Go ahead, Leafs. Go in there. Have a great time. I know it's been sanitized. And I'm just joking. Let's face it. There's a lot of Toronto fans in the greater metropolitan Detroit area because we're so close to Canada. But boy, that would be kind of cool, because that's the one thing I think would be kind of funny. If it, and it's not going to be played at Little Caesars. I wish it would be, unless things change. Maybe in 2, 3 months from now, everything is calmed down, and because it is the ultimate venue. But it's say, hey, Austin, here's your locker room right here. Yep. Complimented the Utah Jazz. They're the last team to use it. Go right ahead, Toronto. Go right in. Make yourself I don't know.
We have
You know,
fans watching, but Art means well. Okay, we love when Toronto comes to town, so don't take that the wrong way. But Art, I do want to ask
we
you.
definitely love the league.
All right, I want to ask you a question about the real hockey side of things here. It's presumed, Gary Bettman said, presumed that there will be no fans during these events. But really, when it comes to the hockey side of things, these players haven't been skating. They haven't been working out on their regular regimen. So he did say that they would need a training camp leading up to this restart. How long is that training camp and what does it entail?
Well, you know, I think it's going to entail a lot of skating, and they may have to ease into it. Most of these fellas have not been on the ice. I know I talked to Joe Valeno. You know, he's rollerblading right now. To try to keep in shape, you know, skate ready, so to speak. It's going to be 3 weeks long, at least 3 weeks long. So once it starts, you know, I would assume at that point that the Red Wings would be in Detroit until they have to go to this venue, wherever that may be. And as I said, Larry Brooks said it's in the Atlantic Division. Somehow I want to put the Red Wings in the Central Division today, but in the Atlantic Division, the Red Wings would be in Florida, either Tampa or Miami, where or Sunrise, Florida, I guess, where the Panthers are located. Anyway, my point being is that, you know, they'd have to have a 3-week training camp, all kinds of things, speculation. You know, they're thinking about even having the draft in June, which I don't know how that would be possible because the standings aren't set. You know, the draft order. I mean, we do know that the Red Wings will be in the top 4 picks, but you know, a lot of things, a lot of uncertainty. But the one thing I also want to stress is that Gary Bettman has said, and, you know, I kind of like this quote in this story. He says, but clearly we plan to play into the summer. Clearly we can play next season, which we intend to do in its entirety starting later. And so with a lot of timing options, we have a great deal of flexibility, and we're not going to rush anything. We're not going to do anything that's crazy. We're going to try to do something under the circumstances at the time that is sensible. And then he also stressed in the health of everybody, fans, players, administrators, you know, health, and they're going to go by what the CDC says. So all of that is very, very important. But this league wants to start up. I'm not too surprised because if you look at it, legitimately, there's 23 teams that have a shot at the playoffs. And the way the schedule is right now, except for the Atlantic Division, Boston has an 8-point lead on Tampa. Then the other first and second place teams in the other 3 division are within 2 or 3 points of each other. And then you have like 6 or 7 teams that are on the cusp of a playoff spot, the final second wild card spot. So I can see why they want to get this season done. They want to make it fair. And again, Gary Bettman stressed, as we talked about on Tuesday's show, the integrity of the league. So this is a big issue. This is an important issue. And I think if you're a hockey fan or a sports fan in general, you've got to feel really good that they're trying to accommodate the rest of the season. They want to make it fair. You know, and let's be honest, you know, the Wings players that I've talked to, they all want to get back. They want to play some hockey this year. So I'm into it. I mean, I'm encouraged by it as long as obviously the curve keeps flattening, you know, cases are going down, people are social distancing, listening to the rules. I mean, the quicker we do what we don't want to do is the quicker we'll be able to do what we want to do, if that makes sense. And one of those is to at least get these guys back on the ice and playing some games.
Exactly. And Art, you briefly mentioned the playoffs. You kind of talked about the teams that are on the bubble there and how important the end of this regular season is to them. We also heard a little bit of a playoff plan different than normal. Can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, I think they're bandying about that. You know, we've heard the 2014 playoff system. You know, that would be and you know, and take each conference and you know, go 1 through 8, regardless of division. Or if you're going to just have 24 teams, or if you go to a 16-team format, no divisions at all, go 1 through 16. I think based on what we've heard right now, though, it is that I think that they're going to try to do, if they can complete the season, keep it that in the division kind of playoffs for the first couple of rounds, and then they have the Atlantic division winner play the Metropolitan Division winner, Pacific play the Central, and then they'll eventually play for the in their conference final, and then play for the Stanley Cup. I would love to see, and depending on how long this goes on, maybe they're going to try to do something different, just because baseball will be starting, the NBA is probably going to be starting, football, if training camps might be starting. I mean, we're going to go from no sports to all sports, in a relatively quick period of time if they can get this together. So, I would love to see the top 16 teams just in a Stanley Cup playoff tournament. One play 16, 15 play 2, 3 play 15, whatever, however it breaks down. I think that would be great, because then, obviously, unfortunately the Red Wings aren't going to be in this year, but let's say, you see Detroit play maybe Colorado again in a playoff, which wouldn't be a Stanley Cup final, but it would still be something like that. I think that would be ultimately really, really good, really cool. And, if you're going to do something different and deviate off the system, what better way than to do it after, when you're in the midst of a pandemic. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see exactly how this is going to turn out. And I do have faith and hope that as long as the health side, which is the most important, calms itself down and allows us to get there, that they'll figure it out. And it's going to be a pretty exciting system for everybody involved.
I agree, Art, and props to everybody involved in the NHL for kind of handling this the best way they can and exploring all options. Because like you said, I think everybody wants to see the season finish. So hopefully we get to that point. And we're going to move on to our second topic of the big three. And this is another really exciting one. The NFL draft is tonight. And I think most sports fans will be tuning into this one, because not only is it the first live sports event in a while, but this is going to set the tone for what other leagues' drafts are going to look like if, in fact, they have to do them virtually, which is probably going to be the case. The NHL hasn't really said when their draft is going to be yet. As of now, it's postponed. But when watching tonight, I think, of course, I'm interested to see who the Lions take, but I'm very interested to see how they run this virtual draft, Art. I want to know how this is going to go and what we can look forward to for the NHL and the MLB even.
Well, yeah, the NFL is king. If you don't believe me, just ask King Roger Goodell, the commissioner. I'm interested to see how this is going to do. This is the precursor. This is the closest thing to live competition that we're going to get. I'm eager to see how this is going to come down. I think that, teams are going to have virtual draft parties, and, how they cut away, and, everyone's social distancing. So what we see tonight is how we're going to see the NBA conduct its draft, how we're going to see the NHL conduct its draft. We're going to get reactions like Mo Siders when he was drafted. Unfortunately, he'll be in his basement, or whomever the Red Wings draft. That no one's going to be together. Riley Green, I'm a big Riley Green fan. All that kind of stuff. I think that this is going to be good, and I think this is good for the psyche of just America in general, to see everybody. We're used to now seeing all these kind of, concerts, Lady Gaga and Elton John, and, John Legend is everywhere, and then that's cool. And I compliment them for doing those things. But if you're a sports fan, and as much as you like these classic games, and there's a ton of them and they're all fun to watch, to actually see something live that you don't know what the outcome is, and you really don't know. The Lions are all over the place. Are they going to go for Okuda, the quarterback for Ohio State, or are they going to try to trade down? And we hear that Miami now wants to get in that third position. And so there's all kinds of things that are swirling around right now. And that is part of what makes sports great, is that unknown. And, also the competition, as I said, there's not going to be too many competition. I guess they're competing for players, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it just to see how it plays itself out as far as picks go. But I'm also eager to see how it's going to be presented, because I know in a couple of months from now, Daniela, you, me, Carly, Kenny, Cal, who's going to join us soon, that's probably how we're going to have to cover the NHL draft. And let's be honest, this is a huge draft for the Red Wings. And, with Steve with a year under his belt, I am eager to see, how the draft plays out for the Wings.
Yes, very eager to see this. So I will definitely be tuning into the NFL draft tonight as kind of a precursor to what's going to happen for us. Let's move on to our third subject in the big three today. And this one is really cool. Big Sean, as we know, he's from Detroit, local rapper, and he made it big. And he is giving back to the city in a really cool way. He's going to hold a virtual conference call kind of thing via Zoom. And it's going to be him and a representative from each of our four professional sports teams. And for the Red Wings, we're going to have Brennan Perlini and Madison Bowie. And then for the Tigers, we're going to have Nico Goodrum and Travis Demerit. And Pause. Can't forget that one. Pause is going to be joining as well. And this also serves as a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club of Southeast Michigan. So it's a really, really cool thing. And you can still register for it, Art. So I think everybody that's watching right now, it starts at 3 p.m. and you can register all the way up to the event. And we kind of touched on it, how great these celebrities are giving back during this COVID-19 pandemic, and how great to see Big Sean from Detroit giving back to the city that he grew up in.
You know, along with Big Sean, Jerome Bettis is going to be part of this, Ludacris. So, I mean, you know, there's some heavy hitters here. I mean, I just love this. I am not surprised. I mean, I'm from Southeast Michigan. I know that Detroiters, the people here in Southeastern Michigan, really throughout the state, you know, when no matter how down they are, no matter the own personal adversity that they see, they all band together. We're all in this together. There is a sense and spirit of community. I don't know if, you know, it's because Detroit gets knocked a lot or something where, you know, we all band together, but I'm really looking forward to this. You know, Jerome Bettis is one of my all-time favorites. You know, he's just a great guy. I can remember I was working at Channel 2 years ago and doing Sunday afternoons, and Jerome Bettis and his dad came in to shoot a segment or something, and he had already been at Notre Dame, and I knew he was from Detroit, and I knew a little bit about him because a friend of mine worked with him at a restaurant, believe it or not, in Livonia, and it was one of these things that are just decent. And I said to them, I said, well, hey, if you guys, I'm here every Sunday if you want to drop by. And I have to admit, Jerome was busy doing things, but his dad came by like 2 or 3 times after that. It just sat and spent the day with me. So, you know, close to my heart. I'm not surprised Jerome Bettis has a great foundation in Pittsburgh, obviously, where he was a star, and then here in Detroit. And, you know, there again, he's from Detroit. He did not play in Detroit, played at Notre Dame, although if Michigan would have moved him to running back and not fullback, he could have been a Wolverine. Maybe a mistake by Bo Schembechler there, one of the few that he made on the field. But with that said, I think that, you know, it just goes to show Jerome Bettis obviously wants to give back too. And then Big Sean, what can you say about him? Every time you turn around, Detroit needs something. Big Sean is right there. I'm looking forward to this. It's from 3 to 5. You make a small donation to the Boys and Girls Club, and before you know it, and there's all kinds of activities. I mean, it's a virtual party. And if there's one thing I know that Detroiters love, it's sports and partying, you know. So I'm looking forward to it. And, you know, I cap those guys.
Yeah. And Big Sean, if you happen to be listening, we'd love to have you on the show to talk about it, right, Art? That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. Did he go to Cass Tech? Because I know from working with Terry Foster, if he went to Cass Tech, I would have to say, Big Sean, CT in the house. Whatever that means. I know everybody from Cass Tech. That's how they greet each other. I'm serious, Danielle. CT in the house. That's exactly what they do.
I love it. I'm glad that you know that too. Because
everybody from Cass Tech out there listening, you know I'm right. That is their
We're going to have to do a who does it the best. Any Cass Tech students that can do that. A big thank you to our friends at Chevy for the Big 3 segment. When our country is faced with adversity, we find a way to get through it. Chevrolet is committed to helping you in any way that we can, from answering your vehicle questions related to service and everything in between. Visit ChevyCares.com to learn more. And now we're going to head into our mailbag segment presented by Little Caesars. Art, I know we've been waiting for this. Your favorite broadcaster is going to join us for this one. Let's bring in Ken Kale for our mailbag segment. Ken, this is the first time you're joining the Word on Woodward, so we have high expectations for you. How are you feeling about this?
I'm doing well. I'm excited about being on the show with you, Daniela and Art, even though you dissed me on the air when you were talking to Dan Dickerson, but that's okay. I know your true feelings. You and I have grown up together a long, long time, but you know what? It's always good to be with you, Art, and talk a little hockey, and you and me are the only one that can talk for an hour about what this team is going to do in the future and enjoy it too.
Well, that's exactly right, Ken. And remember, kind of like in Casablanca, they'll always have Paris. We'll always have Dean's Muscle Inn on Venice Beach.
Those are great times, yes.
Oh, without question. And there's incriminating evidence of a few pictures. So,
Let's get the mailbag rolling, you guys. We've got the first question, and this one is for you, Ken. And I'm interested to hear your answer because I know we touched on this a little bit in the forecheck a couple of weeks ago. This is from Mike from Sterling Heights. Will the Wings be looking for another goalie in this year's NHL draft?
Well, the answer is yes. Will they take a goaltender in the first round? I would have to say no. And I guess what Mike's alluding to is that Russian goaltender Yaroslav Askarov, who I believe is going to be taken in the first round of the draft. Now, if he slips down towards the early, or if he misses in the first round and nobody selects him, then obviously he's there for the Red Wings early in that second round. But, I remember talking with Jimmy Devellano and also Ken Holland, and, the game plan always, I think, for a lot of teams is to take a goaltender. The Red Wings have 10 picks right now, I believe, in this year's draft. And you have to look down the road, and you're hoping that if you do take a goaltender each and every year in one of those slots, that down the road, maybe with a little luck and you cross your fingers a little bit, that goaltender down the road could be a good signing and maybe a goaltender of the future. The Red Wings obviously need a goaltender. They need somebody down the road who's gonna really take the reins and be a big part of this club down the road. So you can only do that by drafting. So I know the Red Wings scouting staff is doing their homework. And I just look at a guy like Pekka Rinne, and Art, I know you can comment on this too. He was taken 258th overall in the draft. I believe it was in 2004. And look at the goaltender he's turned out to be. So you never know. You're always looking for those diamonds in the rough. And again, Steve Yzerman likes to think out of the box, but I believe that the Red Wings will go in one of the first 4 picks of the draft, wherever they may end up, that they're going to go for a forward or a defenseman.
Well, I agree with what Ken's saying without question, Danielle.
Go ahead, Art. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, the only way I see them getting Askarov, if he drops down a little bit and they take a couple of those number 2 draft picks that they have and kind of package that up and somehow try to draft up into the middle of that first round, because Askarov is going to go. He's not going to last very, very long. Now, if Steve were able to pull that off, as I told, I don't know if you saw Amelia was in the background. Now everyone wants to know about my cat, or at least one of the 3. There he is. But anyway, he opened up the door himself. I thought it was locked. But with that said, I think that if Yzerman could pull something like that off, where he could, get a mid-round pick and Askarov is still there, and whomever they get, which is going to be a high-end player in that top 4, what a draft, Yzerman pulls off miracles. I really do think that he could walk across from Windsor to Detroit, across the Detroit River, if he is able to do a deal like that.
Art, I got to give you some credit, actually. That was the first time that you've mentioned Steve Yzerman in the show, I believe. So that's got to be a new record. That's a lot of time for you to not say the name Steve Yzerman.
My goal today is only to mention him 5 times, and I think I'm already up to 3. So, I'm
All right. All right, we have another question for you. Interesting. Yeah, you got to listen to this question, Art, because this one's interesting. I hope that you have a good answer for this one. Pete from Plymouth, who would win in a series? Is it the 1968 Tigers or the 1984 Tigers?
Since most of the 84 Tigers are my contemporaries, and when I mean contemporaries, I was right around the same age as a lot of them, like Gibby and I are, basically the same age. I would have to say the 68 Tigers without question. This was a team that came back from deficits. They were down 3-1 in the World Series. They 27 games from the 7th inning on. Denny McClain won 31 games. Mickey Lolich was a stud. That lineup, Al Kaline, Norm Cash, Jimmy Northrup, Mickey Stanley, Bill Freehand. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, they were just a wonderful team. And maybe it's because you really, I think the teams that you really remember are your boyhood teams. And I was right at the age where the first team that I remember winning a world championship are the 68 Detroit Tigers. And so that team is always going to be my team. And maybe I'm really, really biased as much as the 84 team, 35-5, winning from wire to wire. I mean, they were extraordinary. More of those guys should be in the Hall of Fame than they are. We talked about Lou Whitaker. Definitely he should be there. But I just look at it, and I really like to get Kenny's thoughts on this too, because I'm sure Kenny remembers the 68 guys. It's a tough call, but I would have to go with the 68 club.
Well, Art, I was 11 years old back in 1968, and I remember that team just like it was yesterday, and it's hard to believe it's been so long, but I agree with you in the fact that they were the comeback kids, and I think they won 27 games in their last at bat during that year, so they certainly had the magic going for them. But I'll tell you what, that 84 Tiger team was actually pretty good, and they came through with some big hits in the clutch, especially that home run by Gibson, and they had Whitaker and Trammell and company, and they were a tough team too. But it seemed like that year in 68, there was a different hero every day. You mentioned McLean winning 31. Nobody talked about Mickey Lolich during the course of the season, yet he came in and won 3 games in the World Series. And, that's unbelievable. But, it would be a great battle. We'll never know. We'll never find out the answer. Both teams were great, and we were treated to some great baseball, not only in 1968, but also in 1984 as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to ask Gibby who would win, because if I know Kirk like I know Kirk, as much as he would want to go with the 84 team, he'd probably say 68 too.
We might have to have him on one day, Art, and you'll have to ask him that question, because I think that would spark some interesting discussion. And yeah, we'll have to look into that one. And Ken, I've got another question for you. This one is Joseph from Okemos, and he wants to ask you, we know that one of the top prospects in this draft happens to be from Germany. His name is Tim Stutzel. And they want to know, would you consider taking a player from Germany as your first round pick 2 years in a row?
Well, first and foremost, it's not up to me to pick the draft choice. It's up to Steve Yzerman. But if it was up to me, I look at Stutzel, and everything I've read about him is unbelievable, and what type of player he is. And I know in our last edition or 2 forecheck shows ago, we were talking about him. He's actually a natural center iceman, and the Red Wings could use a center iceman. And he's playing on the wing. So the thing about him is he's a pretty versatile player. And if you can play and you're comfortable, and he seems like he's pretty good at both the center and the left wing position, then obviously you're getting a guy that's pretty talented out there. And what I really like about him, from what I've read, I haven't really seen him play too much, is that he's a competitor, and he's got this desire and will to win. And I think that's something that the Red Wings need a little more of. They need guys that are going to come into that locker room and, can't stand to lose. And, they compete, nothing, all the time. But, when you get guys, and I think back to the Red Wings teams like Yzerman and Kris Draper, these are guys that just hated to lose. They wanted to win each and every shift that they were on the ice, each and every game that they could. And they provided a lot of fire in that locker room. So, he brings a lot of good things to the table. I don't know. Like I said, Steve Yzerman likes to pick outside the box. Obviously, he's a good player. But, there's some other players, if the Red Wings don't get that number 1 pick, that are available too. So we'll just have to wait and find out. But indeed, he's a pretty outstanding talent from what I've read and what I've seen.
Ken, you kind of touched on it. You got to think that if the Red Wings do end up with the first overall pick, they're going to take Alexi Lafreniere. But I actually found this question quite interesting because of how well Mo Seider is progressing after being from Germany. And the team that he played on was Mannheim. It's the same team that Tim Stutzel plays for. Art, do you think that the Red Wings are watching Germany a little bit more than they maybe would have a couple of years ago or a few years ago?
Well, I think if we just look at the past history of the German people, when they set their mind that they're going to do something, they pretty much do it. And so I think that, and my last name's German, by the way, so I don't want all the Germans to get all upset with me. But I'll say this: I think that league in Mannheim And, Ben Simon, the coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins, played in that league. And, he said, listen, that's legitimate hockey. And I know that there has been a commitment by the German Sports Federation to really amp it up as far as hockey goes. So I think that, the Red Wings, much like they were on the cutting edge of drafting Europeans many, many years ago, bringing over Europeans. Kenny will remember, Netamansky and that whole first wave of players that they brought, Garpenloff, guys like that. I think that, again, they're on the cutting edge, and, they see, and there have been some pretty good Germans that have been in the NHL over the years, but right now, Mo Seider is just the beginning, I think, of a good crop. I think they would take the German forward. I think they would take Stutzel or Stutzel, however it's said, how the proper pronunciation, simply because he can play center, as Ken said, and, he's competitive. And, he, again, much like Mo Seider last year, has been ascending up the charts. Central Scouting rated him the #1 European prospect. Lafreniere is the North American one. So that's a guy to really, really look at. Now, if they fall to #4 and all of them are gone, I still think at #4 they're going to tag Jamie Drysdale. By all accounts, he's a top line 1 or 2 defenseman, can run a power play, offensively gifted. I think you throw him in there along with Mo Seider, and then you've got Hronek. And Tomisto looks like he might be a player. Obviously, Lindstrom. Red Wings defensive core is going to be young pretty soon. Danny DeKaiser will be the elder statesman leading it. I think, again, the blue line, which needs to be rebuilt, could be rebuilt really, really quickly. But to answer your question, I have no problem if they take the German.
I like that answer. All right, we're going to finish up this mailbag segment with one more question. Ken, we're going to start with you on this one. And this one is from, I'm forgetting the name. It's Josh from Grand Blanc. And he asked, who's your favorite player growing up? Now, I want you to open this up to Red Wings and Tigers. So, Ken, start with you. Who is your favorite player?
Well, obviously, when I was growing up liking hockey in the mid-'60s and I was just a young kid, obviously Gordie Howe here in Detroit was Mr. Hockey everywhere, and he was just amazing. And I remember my first NHL game I ever went to was an afternoon game at the old Olympia. It was January 25th, 1969. And just to be able to see Gordie Howe play, and he was late in his career, but he was such a dynamic player, and he made some plays both right-handed and left-handed, actually scored a goal in that game. He actually elbowed Carol Vadnais in that game in front of the penalty box. And I think he sliced half his ear off with that elbow. So he was an amazing player. And if you didn't give him his space out on the ice, he would just go right through you. But actually, I have 2 hockey players that I really like too. And I guess my all-time favorite is Gordie Howe. But when I was in high school and the Red Wings drafted Marcel Dionne, to me, he was the most exciting, dynamic center iceman I've ever seen. The things that he could do out onto the ice. And when the Red Wings got him, they were going through some tough times. And I said, wow, we're going to get this guy for the next 18 to 20 years, and it's going to be great. But wouldn't you know it, he kind of had a falling out with the organization, ended up with the Los Angeles Kings, and I followed him through his career with the Kings just because I liked him so much. But he was an amazing player. And he's one of those guys that scored over 700 goals but never won a Stanley Cup. Too bad for that, but he was a dynamic hockey player. As for Tigers, I was always a Jim Northrup fan. I was a left-handed batter when I was in high school. I took his number 5, just because I liked him so much. And I just love watching him play out in the outfield. And there were so many great players back in the day to watch. But, Al Kaline, of course, who just passed away, he was an all-time favorite. But I just like Jim Northrup, and he was one of my all-time favorite. And he had a great series in '68 as well.
All right, Art, it's going to be tough to follow up that answer, but who is your favorite player?
Well, Red Wings, I look at Al Kaline and Gordie Howe as standalones. They're on the Mount Rushmore. So I loved both of those players, obviously. I'm going to go a little bit out of the box. The first autograph I ever got as a kid was a defenseman named Ronnie Harris for the Red Wings. And he, my aunt was in the hospital, and she shared a room with his wife. And so I met him, and he gave me an autographed picture. So I've always I always liked him. But a guy that, and this is a guy, and I think it was more his name, and and I'm a little odd. I'll admit that. Al Carlander was a guy that I just always liked. I think he was number 14. if I remember correctly. Could not be. I mean, I'm going off the top of my head. I just like the way that he played. Marcel Dionne, I can remember when he scored his first goal as a Red Wing, that it was against St. Louis. The Red Wings were getting blown out. And I can remember Bud Lynch's call was, "The kid scores," and obviously Marcel Dionne is a great player, and too bad he did have that falling out. When I look at the Tigers, I'm right there with Ken. I loved Jim Northrup, and I also love Dick McAuliffe. I bat left-handed. I'm left-handed. But I love McAuliffe's weird stance that he had up at the plate, and he was usually the Tigers' leadoff hitter. And then Jimmy Northrup was just a big-time player. He just played, he got a lot of big hits. So I would have to say those two. And, and a little bit soft spot for Mickey Stanley, especially when he moved to shortstop from center field in the 68 series. I mean, the one thing about Detroit, and I know Ken can agree to this, is that our teams have been here for such a long time, and they've had legendary ball players. I never saw Ty Cobb play, or Harry Heilman, or Hank Greenberg, or Charlie Gehringer. I can go on and on and on. And the Red Wings list is iconic. It's just a great place to grow up and be a sports fan. And then you throw in the major colleges and the Big Ten and all that. I mean, we have just been so privileged to having so many great athletes, don the Detroit uniform or college uniforms, whether it be Michigan, Michigan State, whatever. I mean, this is a great area if you're a sports fan.
And if I could add one thing, Daniela and Art, real quick here, a lot of times when you're a kid, you really want to go to Tiger Stadium and you want to watch batting practice and get there early. And I think I was the only one that liked to get there early and watch Mickey Stanley shag fly balls out in center field. And a lot of those days, I mean, he was such a great center fielder, probably one of the best. I can't tell you how many Gold Gloves he had. One of the best athletes I think the Tigers have ever had, bar none. And I was just amazed at how he could just easily track down fly balls out in the outfield. And playing high school ball, I was an outfielder myself, and I always liked getting to the park and just watching him run after balls and time balls and judge balls out there. And he was just an amazing, amazing outfielder. And both of those guys, Stanley and Northrup, I had a soft spot in my heart because they are from Michigan on the western side of the state. And, that to me, we always aspire to try and be a major league player if you're growing up playing baseball as a kid. And that kind of gave us hope that if you grow up in Michigan, that maybe one day you could play for your hometown team, the Detroit Tigers.
I always love talking to both of you. Sorry, Art, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to
I'm sorry, Danielle. I know I'm kind of stepping on you today, and I apologize. But I'm with my idol, Ken Cal, so I'm all psyched up here. But Ken's right. Today. Northrup, Stanley, Wolich, Freehand, Willie Horton, the great Willie Horton. One of my all-time, and the Gator, Gates Brown, all of these guys. Well, Gates Brown, I think, was from Ohio, but they all had Midwestern ties or Michigan roots. The 68 Tigers were filled with guys from Michigan, and that's obviously one thing that I was that I was into too. You can tell that Ken and I grew up in the same era because our reference points are almost identical. So it's cool.
And Art, that's what I was going to say. I always enjoy when I have the both of you on, and this is not meant to aid you guys by any means, but I always learn so much from hearing your guys' conversations and answers to these questions, because I obviously wasn't there for all of these experiences. So it very cool. I love having you both together. Ken, thank you so much for joining us today, and you're going to be back very soon. So thank you for being our mailbag guest today.
Well, I enjoy the show, and all the best to you guys and all of our viewers out there.
Thank you, Ken. And a big thank you to our friends at Little Caesars for presenting the mailbag. Little Caesars proudly introduces their hot and ready pepperoni cheeser. You get a large pizza topped with classic pepperoni, fresh mozzarella, and a toasted Parmesan and Asiago cheese crust for just $7. Try our no-contact pizza portal for delivery from Little Caesars. After reading that, I'm a little bit hungry now, so I might have to get myself one of those pizzas today. Maybe I'll do that while we are catching up with Carly, thanks to our friends at Meijer.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Catching Up with Carly, presented by Meijer. Today, I am joined by Tigers alum and 1968 World Series champion, John Warden. John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. How have you been?
Carly, it seems like I've known you all my life. I've been well. Yeah.
I love it. What have you been doing to keep busy in quarantine?
Well, doing a lot of crossword puzzles, and it's just walking around. Do a little walk up and down the sidewalk. Stay loose. Watch a lot of TV. My wife and I binge watched the Tiger, Joe Exotic, yesterday. It was on Netflix.
All right, well, we're going to take a trip down memory lane, and let's start with your season playing for the Detroit Tigers. What was it like pitching for a club in the big leagues?
Well, it's unbelievable. I was 21 years old. I was the youngest kid on the team. And I played 2 years of A-ball, which they have A, double A, triple A, and the big leagues. Mm-hmm. And, nobody goes from A-ball to the big league. You go to double A and then triple A, blah, blah, blah. But I had two pretty good back-to-back years. And I got put on the big league roster and went to spring training in '68 with the big club. K-Line and Cash and Horton and Danny McClain and Lolich. We were loaded with hitting.
Oh, yeah.
We were stacked.
Now, let's talk about one specific teammate you mentioned, the late Al Kaline. The world of baseball definitely lost a good one with his passing. Can you tell me about the relationship you had with Mr. Tiger, both on and off the field?
Al Kaline was just a consummate player, man. Mm-hmm. When he walked in the room, it was like your high school principal coming into your math class. Everybody's just set up straight. Al Kaline, he had that personality. He had to personify his, stature. And he just never could let go. He wasn't a rah-rah guy. Mm-hmm. He led by his leadership with his bat and his glove. And he could play, and it's just amazing. And of course, I'd never met him before. So that's my first, spring training, first time I'd ever met some of these guys. So, but Al Kaline, everybody, you wore that old English tee, you were one of his best friends because he loved the Tigers. But I'll tell you a funny story. On the way back from St. Louis, we win the World Series in the 7th game. Mm-hmm. And so we had a charter plane. I went on the next down the line. Here's Kaline, sitting with his beautiful wife, Louise. And I said, Al, I pat him on the shoulder, and I said, now, this is his 16th year. I said, Al, I've been waiting a long time for this. He goes, kiss my ass, Warden. You got your first year. Oh, he was so bad. He said, I've waited 16 years. You get it the first year. I said, well, I tried to tell you guys, if you'd have brought me up at 67, we'd have won then. We'd have back-to-back. Oh, but he would always he and I just had that bond.
What is one thing about Mr. Kaline that you know that the general public may not know?
But Kaline, sometimes he's misread by being a little bit quiet, a little bit of an introvert at times, and they don't know what the passion he had for the town. He loved the fans. And he signed autographs like crazy, and we had a gal, Peggy, worked in the office, and she would bring in Al, maybe 20, 25 things every day that he was in the office, from their mail-in stuff to the stadium, and he'd sit down and sign 15, 20, 25 items, and then she'd mail them out for the fans. And a lot of people don't realize, the stuff that he did behind the scenes.
What an amazing man he sounded like. That's absolutely incredible. Great. What kind of legacy is he leaving behind?
One that'll never be topped. There's nobody who can do the things he did. It's just, it still gets me 2 weeks. It happened 2 weeks ago, and it still got me. My gut's still turning when I talk about Al. And just stand there and say, I love you, and you're the guy, and thanks for your help that you brought me along as a rookie. Made sure nobody gave me crap. So it's just, and the legacy is just, it's like the city of Detroit. You got like a Gordie Howe from hockey. Mm-hmm. You got Len Barney, Don Barney, and Night Train Lane, and Dick LeBeau, some of the great Detroit Lions. And then you got Al Kaline.
Right.
Pat Cobb was one of the greatest players ever, but he's way back in a different era, 20s, 30s. It was a different game. But Al Kaline, I mean, all you got to do is say 6, and everybody that knows baseball knows who you're talking about.
Everyone knows, and I am so incredibly sorry for the loss of your close friend. Is there a message you'd like to leave with Tiger fans during this time?
I like to tell the Tiger fans, because they're such great fans, and I want to tell them, it's been a tough year last year. Don't give up on these kids. Don't give up on them. Buy your tickets. Go out and see these kids play. Root them on, because they're rebuilding. They're restarting over. And I know they got rid of a lot of players. Verlander went to Houston and won the World Series, and I'm glad to see Justin get a ring. They had a lot of great players that they moved. Gardenhire, I think, is the right manager for this type of team. Cabrera is probably one of the greatest hitters. Kaline even said in the hitting clinic at Fancy Camp, he said, guys, I thought I was a pretty good hitter. Miguel Cabrera is the best hitter I've ever seen.
Wow, that's big time right there.
Yeah.
That's something.
Listen to this. He's at the cage, and then Miggy says, hey, watch this. Holding on right field, second row. It's a ball. It's batting practice. It's a ball, second row, right field. Okay, home run, left field, second row, boom, it's it over there. I mean, the guy was unbelievable. But to the fans of Detroit, stay with these guys. Bring them through, and Al Avila is gonna do the job, and they'll get some good players, and they'll keep winning. They got a couple good pitchers coming up that are gonna make a big splash, and I just don't give up. And even Kaline said when you come to camp, he tell the fans at Fancy Camp, hey, stick with us. Don't give up on these kids. But it's just the fans, and they're great fans. I get stuff. I'll tell you one thing with this quarantine. There's a lot of people really digging down deep, because I've got more fan mail in the last 3 weeks than I have all year. I got 3 in one day. That's like a miracle for me.
I love it. I love it. You deserve it.
I said, thanks for remembering me.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We really appreciate it. I hope you and your loved ones stay healthy during this time.
Yeah, you guys too. Stay healthy, and I'll be up once they get the season rolling. I'm looking you guys up. We're going to go have a cold one.
Yeah, I'm holding you to it. All right, take care now.
All right, take care. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. That's it for this episode of Catching Up with Carly, presented by Meyer. Back to you, Daniela. I think she muted herself.
And I'm sorry, everybody. You couldn't hear me there. That was my own fault. I muted myself, and here I am now. I apologize. We will get past these little technical difficulties. It is time for Bet You Didn't Know, presented by Motor City Casino. And Carly is actually going to join us for this segment. And so, yeah, Carly's going to join us after that awesome interview. And Carly, I wanted to ask you about that, because not only did John give us some great Al Kaline memories, he got us pretty amped up for the current Tigers, right? Like, I'm excited for Tigers season now.
He was fantastic. We had a few technical difficulties trying to get to that interview. That's why it was just a call. But I mean, hearing his stories, not just about Kaline, his buddy, but like about just the camaraderie around the Tigers fans and the players, like how much they truly love the fans and the city of Detroit. And then pivoting to now talking about the current state of the Tigers organization and just the faith that he has in the team, and moving forward, who we're going to get this coming season, who we're going to see pitching. It's just like incredible to hear from a former Tigers point of view what it's going to look like in this next season. And I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm ready for Tigers games. I miss it.
I do too. I mean, like you said, that was just an incredible interview. I loved it so much, and we're all excited. And I know Art has a little surprise for us, Carly. This Bet You Didn't Know segment is going to be a little different than it was last time. So, Art, what you got?
Here we go.
Well, here we go. It's always great to see both of you, as always. Yeah, this is going to be 2 truths and a lie. Now, I have really studied up on this, and I'm going to read off 3 facts. 2 of them are true.
Okay.
One of them is a bold-faced lie. And as you know, I detest lying.
Wow.
We're going to do it, okay? No.
I'm excited
Now,
to see
get
this.
ready.
Okay.
Okay, here they are. The 2 truths and the lie. Number 1, the Yankees won all 6 of their World Series that they played against the Brooklyn Dodgers. That was even before my time, believe it or not. The Brooklyn Dodgers are now obviously the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Kansas City Royals once wore Milwaukee Brewers jerseys for a game in Milwaukee against Milwaukee. The Royals wore Brewers jerseys, and this will be close to your heart since you're both Spartans. The person who invented the radar gun also coached baseball at Michigan State. There you have it. Take your time, but not too much time. And what do you think?
Okay.
Which
so
one?
I'll go
Which
first. I'm going to say the first is a lie, that the Yankees did not win all 6 of the series. It's been a while since the Dodgers have been the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's just my gamble. My reasoning is that I've heard the Royals had worn Brewers jersey. I'd heard that story. My other reasoning is just a gamble for no specific reason at all. I'm a Spartan alum, so I have faith in the third statement.
Well,
So I'm going to go first.
Carly kind of
It's a lie.
gave that away. My guess was that the Brewers had to, or the jersey swap there, that the Milwaukee Brewers or Kansas City Royals had to wear Brewers jerseys, because I always feel like there's got to be a way that you have some kind of backup jersey, or you get a jersey somewhere. But Carly thinks that happened. I might have
My dad
to
told
go against.
big baseball. My dad told me that before, so that was the only
All right,
thing
so
I knew.
I'm checking that one off the list. And I know that rivalry between the Dodgers and the Yankees was pretty intense for a while there. And I know they played a lot, but I can't. No, you know what? I'm going to have to go against my Spartans on this one. I'm going to go with the third one. Wait, am I supposed to pick the true one or the lie?
No,
I
you
picked
picked
the lie.
the lie. What is the false?
lie.
I picked the lie.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, I was right there. So I'm going to pick the third one. That's the guy that got his radar gun. Went from Michigan State.
Okay, first of all, there's
enlighten
too
us,
much
Art.
Spartan love. I just want to say this. Branch Rickey, who brought Jackie Robinson to the major leagues, long overdue, was a Michigan grad. All right. Okay, with that said, let's get to this. The Yankees won all 6 of their World Series. They played against the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Kansas City Royals once wore Milwaukee Brewers jerseys in a game in Milwaukee, and the person who invented the radar gun coached baseball at Michigan State. 2 are truths, 1 is a lie. And, without further ado, the winner, if there is a winner in this, there you go. Yes, the lie is the Yankees. The Yankees only won 5 of 6 World Series they played against the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Kansas City Royals, this is an interesting story. I can't. You know what? You're going to
one is because I feel like you would play that kind of trick on me, like kind of, I thought maybe you'd lie about that one. This is a trick.
I thought that too.
You stumped me.
I thought that was a great question.
I do say this, Daniela. You're going to have to. Your Michigan State degree is now invalid. But let's be honest, you're not really losing much.
Oh,
Hey, Michigan State people hate me anyway. So, but no, I'm just joking. I love the green and white. I really do.
He's not joking. And I keep moving my own mic on that sometimes. I wish I could mute Art from my computer.
I know.
No, hey, let me tell you. All right, as I said, the lie was the Yankees won 5 of 6 from the Dodgers in the World Series. Their only title They won their only title in Brooklyn in 1955. That's the Dodgers, who are now the LA Dodgers. Now, this is an interesting story. And, I wonder, we've got to see what Kenny Cal is doing or something. The Royals lost to the Brewers 4-0 with Milwaukee wearing the white uniforms and Kansas City wearing the Brewers sky blue uniform. The night before, someone had pilfered 52 of 60 jerseys, along with 20 caps, 20 gloves, 15 jackets, and 10 pairs of shoes. Obviously, in today's world, they would be on eBay in a second. Other odd notes were that the thieves missed George Brett's jersey. If you're going to rob, you're not going to take George Brett's jersey. So he wore his Royals uniform during the game and shared his number 5 with Hal McRae, Tiger batting coach and bench coach, who was wearing the Brewers number 5 jersey. So, that's pretty interesting. And yes, we got to give the props to the Spartans. Charles Litweiler invented over 100 baseball items with his innovation, like the radar gun, the quick drying agent that they put on fields. Honestly, before that, get this, they used to use a mixture of gasoline and sawdust and set the infield on fire, I guess, to dry it out, and was the first Major League Baseball player, exactly, to sew the fingers of his gloves together. He won a World Series. As a player, took Florida State to the College World Series while he worked with USA Baseball to get baseball to the Olympics. I mean, Charles Litweiler. I guess my only question about Charles is why didn't he go to Michigan? Sounds like a guy that should have. But there he is. Congratulations to him. Invented the radar gun. So hey, you were 50% on that, Daniela. Again, you're going to have to answer to a lot of Spartans, and then Carly. You've gotten an honorary doctorate degree on your answer, so way to go.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you.
I want to test you next time, Art, okay? We're going to have just like a trivia game, and I'm going to give you a grade on that one, okay?
Okay.
Geez. I don't know. Art knows everything. I always get a history lesson when I talk to Art.
You're right. Well, if we put both of our brain power together, yours clearly is a little higher than mine at this point, we might be able to come up with some questions that will stump him, right?
I think so. I think maybe if we shift gears away from sports, we could get him with a few things.
There you go. We might have to do that, but Carly, thank you so much for joining us for this segment, and we'll see you later for our Let's Socialize segment. This segment has been presented by Motor City Casino Hotel. So thank you to our friends there for bringing us Bet You Didn't Know. And now we're going to go into our Downtown Hockey Town segment presented by Labatt Blue. Welcome back to the Word on Woodward, everybody. It's time for our Downtown Hockey Town segment presented by Labatt Blue. And we are so excited to welcome Director of Amateur Scouting, Kris Draper. He's joining us right now. Kris, thank you so much for being here as always.
Daniela, thank you for having me. Hello, Art.
Hello, Kris. How are you? You're looking good as always, Drapes.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, Kris, I want to start this off by a little conversation we had earlier. You said that you've been watching some of the replays on Fox Sports Detroit of these Red Wings Classics games, which you were obviously a part of, and you found a way to reconnect with some of your teammates over this.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun watching 1997. Probably a couple of my favorite highlights. Obviously, the shorthanded goal that Kirk Maltby scored. That was something that was special. And one of my moments that I always make sure that I bug Joe Kocur about, when he scored that backhand shelf. If you just look off to the side of the net, I'm sitting there and I got my stick up and I'm ready for a one-timer. And Joe Kocur does not see me at all. And he buries it for a goal. So as that game was on, I actually videotaped it. And I said, Joey, I know you didn't see me, but I'm sure you heard me. And now here's the video to show you how wide open I really was. So we had a nice little chuckle with that. And then, I was kidding around with Brendan Shanahan. We were down 5-on-3. And Scotty Bowman put Shanny out there to kill a penalty. I don't remember that. And so I had to rewind it and videotape it. And I had to send that to Shanny. And so we had a little fun with that and a lot of laughs, with that. And then, the fun part, we were watching 2008. And I sent Dan Cleary a text saying, are you watching this? And he wasn't, and he put it on. And then I got Dallas Drake and Chris Osgood, and then our assistant trainer at the time, Frosty, and we were kind of texting and going back and forth on it, and probably almost for 2 periods. And it was, you know what, it was really fun to just reconnect with those guys and walk down memory lane. And Ozzie, you know, one of Ozzie's highlights, and he always talks about this, was when Dallas Drake took a penalty, and then about 20 seconds later, I took a penalty. We were shorthanded for probably about 1:20 seconds, down 5-on-3. Henrik Zetterberg was unbelievable on that PK, and Ozzie made a couple big saves. So we had some laughs about that, and Dally and I were talking about how I don't think we were breathing. We certainly weren't looking, and we didn't say a word. And when they focus in on the penalty box, you can see how nervous we are at that moment for sure. So with those games being played, there was a lot of fun. It was great reconnecting with some of my former teammates. We had some good laughs.
We want to talk to you a little bit about your current role with the Red Wings as the director of amateur scouting. So to start this off, why don't you tell us how things are going in your new role, and really what does your day-to-day look like?
Director of amateur scouting. This is my first year doing it. Under Steve Yzerman, and when Ken left, there was some changes with the staff. We brought in Jesse Wallen, one of my chief amateur scouts, who was obviously a Detroit Red Wing draft pick. He was working with the St. Louis Blues. We hired him after they won the Stanley Cup, which was great. Jesse, unbelievable hockey guy. He was a great teammate, real good person, and a tremendous worker. So big asset to our scouting staff. And then Ryan Rozmirski came over from the Nashville Predators. Between Håkan Andersson, who's the director of European amateur scouting, myself, Jesse Wallen, Ryan Rozmirski, we're now running our amateur staff. So we know how important the draft is. And, right now, just taking advantage of technology, watching a lot of video on a lot of prospects. When you go out there and you watch the games, I would say now, just kind of self-checking everything that I feel that I watched right up until the shutdown of the amateur hockey season. And it's kept me busy, and we've had some great phone calls. I'm, in constant communication with any of our staff, whether it's in Europe or over here in North America, just calling, talking to them, asking who they're watching, what they've seen. And we're really just trying to keep everything as fresh as possible.
Kris, when this COVID-19 pandemic started to hit, I know you travel the globe to look at players. Were you in North America, or did you have to somehow make your way back to North America from Europe? When it all kind of came down, where exactly were you, and what did you have to do?
Fortunately, I was in North America. I was in the United States. I had just come back. I went actually and watched New England Prep School. Their playoffs were underway, and I went into Boston there. But I had on the Monday before the shutdown happened, I was scheduled to fly back over to Europe. So there was a trip planned. Myself, Jesse, and Ryan Rozmirski were all heading over to Europe as all the European playoffs were about to start, and we were just going to kind of go over. And our plan was to go through Germany and Sweden to go watch some players over there. So it was obviously it ended up being canceled, but thankfully I was in the U.S. and when it happened, I was at home.
So, Kris, you're talking about being able to travel to Europe, obviously, to scout some of these guys that you might be interested in. With this shutdown, is scouting kind of at a halt, or how are you guys doing your business now that you can't really travel?
It's kind of been unique for everyone within our organization. Usually right now we would be in Plymouth for the U18 World Championships. That unfortunately had to be canceled. But obviously under the circumstances, we knew that was going to happen. But, that you kind of look at where you would be right now and what you would be doing. But, with everything going on in the world, we know that, sports aren't going to be played. So right now it's doing a lot of video. And what I've done, I've reached out to all our scouts and basically from players in their area, and I've asked them, games that have really stuck out for you, for prospects in your area. send me the game information, and then certainly, I'll go back and watch it. And that's really what we're doing. And like I said, it's still constant communication of watching video, talking to prospects, and certainly talking to all our scouts to make sure that, we continue to keep things fresh and really do whatever we can do right now. And the bottom line is just watching a lot of video and, trying to, have some conversations with these prospects, because usually you rely on that throughout the season and then certainly into the combine. But right now we're not sure, kind of what's going to happen here, when things start up.
Kris, is this the culmination, obviously, for these players that are going to be eligible for the draft this year? But these are players that many of them, I would assume, you have been familiar with for a number of years now. It just doesn't begin a couple of months ago when you've been preparing for this and for these players in their draft year, I would imagine, for at least 2 or 3 seasons.
Absolutely. We've done, we've watched these players, for sure the last couple of years, and then watching them in, even you start, this year would have started the Ivan Halinka, the Gretzky Halinka, which would have started in Slovakia in the first week of August. And then basically right through September up until things were shut down, that's kind of where we go. And every time you go into Sweden, obviously Håkan Andersson, and we have Thomas Carlson there. You go in and they're going to guide you to the prospects that they like. And you go into Finland and you're going to be with our Finnish scout. You just kind of keep bouncing around all through Europe where it's going to be. And we're with our Europeans. And then the same thing through North America. Really, it's just constant communication is really what it is. When these area scouts are there, they're watching. They know what we'd like to call it, the Red Wing DNA of what we're looking for in a prospect. And then from there, we continue to watch as they progress. So it's unique. It's a lot of watching. It's a lot of communication. And then from there, it's game reports, it's video, it's talks. And that's really what we're doing right now. We're continue doing that, even though there isn't any hockey.
Kris, I want to switch gears just a little bit here and talk about some current Red Wings prospects. You had the chance to be at the World Juniors tournament where Moritz Seider, Joe Veleno, Jared Macisaac were all playing. When you were watching them, what was kind of your evaluation of their progress?
I'll start with Mo. I thought he had a fantastic tournament. To me, he was one of the best defensemen there. And obviously, I'm going to be a little biased. There's nothing wrong with that. He's a Red Wing draft pick, but when other organizations, other scouts come up and compliment how well one of your prospects is playing, that means a lot. And there was a lot of people that reached out with the play of Moritz Seider. An opportunity. He probably hadn't played, against his own age group for a couple of years. He was in Mannheim playing in the DEL, which is the men's league, where we drafted him out of, and then into Grand Rapids playing against men. So for him to go into that tournament and play against other, other players that are, under 20, I thought he did a great job. He had an opportunity which was so important, and which we talk about with his development, to play on the power play, play on the penalty kill. He was playing against the other team's top lines, which is so important for development. And just, the 5-on-5. I mean, I think there were some games it looked like he wasn't coming off the ice. He certainly handled it well. He embraced the role. And they played they played Canada, they played Russia, they played real teams, real prospects, and Mo did a fantastic job. So I thought it was a great tournament for Mo. Joe Veleno and Jared Macisaac obviously playing on Team Canada. I have to throw it in that they were gold medal winners. Team Canada was. And I thought Joe played a real crucial role on that team. He was playing in all situations. He was playing power play. He was taking some big face-offs. Team Canada's coach, Dale Hunter, really, raved about how he could trust Joe in all situations, and especially loved, what he was doing in the face-off circle and winning big face-offs. Those are things that are going to be so important. Mo getting an opportunity to play in all situations, Joe Veleno being able to do that. And he was on the power play. He was used in different positions there. Sometimes he was used as the bumper, and we thought he did a real good job. And sometimes he was on his offside flank, and he showed some real deception and made some real high-end plays, which we love to see. I thought his skating was an asset, and certainly his compete. He ended up getting suspended for a game over there, but I thought he did a great job as well. Jared Macisaac, I thought it was huge that he made the team under the circumstances of not playing a lot of hockey early on in the season. Obviously, he didn't have a training camp. He had his shoulder. He had surgery on his shoulder. He had to repair that, and he basically came back. And I think he got 8 or 9 games before the World Junior Camp, and then went right into that camp. And obviously, the body of work had a big role of why Jared Macisaac went. But for not playing a lot of hockey and going into the best tournament that under 20 hockey players can play in, we all felt as an organization that Mac did a real good job. He was on the PK. He was playing in, some big minutes down the stretch and in some important minutes against the other team's top line. Real competitive hockey player. And, so all 3 of those guys, they went in, they represented their countries, and we thought they did a great job. And it's always fun to watch your prospects play at the World Juniors, and you want to see how they do against the best of the best and against the other organizations' top prospects. And we were excited with the play of all 3 of them.
Well, Kris, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope that next time we're talking to you, it's in person and we've got some hockey going on again.
That sounds really good. Yeah. And, once again, just ending the call, I can't thank the first responders enough for everything that's going on right now. We get to sit here and talk about hockey, and we know, what a tough place Michigan is right now with the coronavirus. And I just, I can't thank, the first responders and all the workers, what they're doing throughout this state. And, so I just say thank you very much. And everyone, stay safe, stay home, stay healthy, and let's just do our part.
Very well said, Kris. I couldn't agree more. And as I said, it's always great catching up with you. I am pretty sure, though, that before this is over, I am going to keep bugging you. So be prepared.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be ready for you. I usually am at this time of year.
Thanks again, Kris. We'll talk to you soon,
Okay.
guys. Word on Woodward. We'll be right back. Big thank you again, Kris, for joining us today for the Word on Woodward Downtown Hockeytown segment, which is brought to you by Labatt Blue Light, refreshing Canadian Pilsner. When we can, we know we all still got to stay safe, but as soon as you can, you got to visit your local retailer and pick some up. And now we're going to get into our next segment, everybody, switching gears and talking some Tigers baseball here. It's time for the Brush Street Beat, presented by McLaren. Art, that was great talking to Kris Draper, right?
Well, it certainly was. Obviously, we went a little long with Drapes, but, I think he's excited about this. He coached for a long time, his son and some Little Caesars teams. And this draft class actually is the draft class that his son is part of. So he's very, very familiar with all these players because he has watched them, and we didn't get into it in the interview, since they were like 12, 13 years old. So he has a really good handle on it. And I'm eager to see what he does as the director of amateur scouting, along working with Steve Yzerman, and then, of course, Håkan Andersson out in Europe. This is going to be a very, very exciting draft, a really exciting time if you're a Red Wing fan. And, Drapes is, he's committed. He and Steve used to all the time. They were known as like workout warriors. They had this workout regimen that I think the rest of the team just did not want to do. And they almost guilted them into a couple of guys trying it, like Marty LaPointe. He was never going to do it. But it was just interesting. Their dynamic has always been good. It has always been close. As I said, they worked out, they were known throughout like the media of this workout regimen that they had together. And, now to see them at the draft table, talking things over, again, I am just psyched and eager to see what those two come up with.
I have to agree with you, Art. And it was really cool to hear how they're continuing their scouting process through video and everything that they're doing communication-wise now that everything's kind of at a halt. Great talking with them. But let's move on to some Tigers baseball, Art. The Tigers, their spring training was obviously halted, and they had a lot of new faces on their team this year. And I think based on the signings that they did make, and CJ Cron, Austin Romine, guys like that, Cameron Maben, they wanted some of that veteran presence, and that's what they got with this. And we heard from Cameron Maybin on Tuesday talking about how well these guys are meshing at spring training, these guys meaning the veterans with the young guys. And I think that's super important to have the good morale and the good connection to have a solid baseball team.
Well, you definitely do need veteran leadership. Obviously this is a team in a rebuild. You're going to bring in some young guys, a guy like, I'm obsessed with Riley Green, so I'll use him as an example. Well, let's say he performs very, very well. I don't know if you're going to see him in Detroit this year, but let's say, yeah, you are. I think having veteran guys in that room who have been there, know the wars, know how to be a good pro, I think it's invaluable. The one thing that I really like about what the Tigers did this year by bringing in veterans, but I mean, if you look at their lineup too, I mean, it reeks of power. And I know Comerica Park is a big ballpark, and if you're a spray hitter, it's great because the gaps are so big. But overall, I think the Tigers are going to hit a lot of home runs this year, and I think that is obviously it's the long ball, and everybody digs the long ball. So I'm encouraged because you have to bottom out before, and the Tigers did. The Tigers, they're more than willing to admit it. You have to do that, but they're on an ascension right now. And depending on who they draft first overall in this upcoming draft and some of these young arms, it's going to start paying off. And the exciting thing about it is that usually there's a surprise or two around there. And if someone can be a surprise player, a player that they get a break on with the youngsters, that's going to be great, because then, obviously you're looking at hopefully an everyday player who is, right around 300 hits for power and all that. But you add them to this mix of veterans that they bring in, the Tigers are going to be competitive, and I think it's going to be a fun baseball season.
Well, let's take a look at what we are thinking their batting order might look like, Art. And we're basing this on what they did at spring training for their first game. So let's take a look at batters 1, 2, and 3. We've got Cameron Maybin leading things off, Nico Goodrum in the 2 spot, and Miguel Cabrera at 3. And Miguel Cabrera is a lock at 3. You have to think Miguel Cabrera is hitting 3. He will be hitting 3. And I think the interesting thing here is Nico Goodrum at 2, because I have seen some other predictions outside different sports writers and everything from the area saying that maybe CJ Cron might be in that spot, or Jonathan Scope. What do you think of that 2 spot, Art?
I think that I like Nico Goodrum being there. I think that, he's he's kind of a streaky hitter at times, but I look at Scope and Cron as being power hitters, somebody to hit behind Cabrera. I think you're going to, with those two guys who both can hit, you're going to have to pitch more to Miguel Cabrera. I'm not taking anything away from Nico Goodrum, but as I said, a little more streaky, has some power, but not the power that Cron and Scope have. So, and Miguel is healthy again, and he's dropped some weight. He loves playing the game. He's a kid at heart. You put Cabrera is always going to be in the 3 hole for the Tigers. That's never going to change. I love Cameron Maybin leading off. I've always been a big Cameron Maybin fan ever since the Tigers drafted him. What is this? This is his 3rd tour of duty here as a Detroiter. Obviously you said with Double D the other day on Tuesday's show that Detroit is special for him. I loved what he had to say about Al Kaline. So Cameron Maybin in the leadoff spot, no problem with that. And then you look at Cabrera, Goodrum, good solid player who got a real good chance, was in the Minnesota organization, got a really good chance with the Tigers, and is starting to come into his own. So I think the one thing that, if you're a Detroit Tigers player and you look at where they're at right now as far as in the rebuild, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of playing time here, and that obviously is what players want. So I think they're looking forward to the opportunity. And and Ron Gardenhire, as John Warden said earlier, I think he is the right manager for this team because he's good with the kids. He takes the pressure off. He's a little bit funny and kind of loose. And, and obviously he's a pro's pro. He knows how to manage a room. And I think the veterans appreciate that.
All right, Art, let's take a look at the next 3 in that batting order. We've got 4, 5, and 6. And this one is Cron, Scope, and Loera. You mentioned CJ Cron a bit, that you think that's a good spot for him to hit after Miguel Cabrera, right?
Yeah, I do. I think that's somebody that can clear the bases. He can, he's going to get some RBIs. He's a really good power hitter. I really do like that. I like the move of bringing both Cron and Scope into the Tigers lineup because they hit for power. They both had over 20 home runs last year. Off the top of my head, I don't know if it's 25, 26 or something like that each. But that's what you need. Miguel Cabrera, if you don't have anybody hitting behind him, then you don't have to pitch to him. But you're going to have people hitting behind him where you're going to have to pitch to him. You're going to have to pitch, Nico Goodrum is a switch hitter, which I really like too. And then Cameron Maben. So these are formidable veteran presence. And as I said, Goodrum is just kind of coming into his own as far as a player because of the opportunity the Tigers have provided him. So, Cabrera is in a better spot. I think if you were to ask Cabrera, he likes the fact of the guys that he's surrounded with in the lineup because he knows that, he's going to get at least a couple of pitches per bat. I mean, granted, he's still Miguel Cabrera, so they're going to try to not give him a lot to hit, but they're going to have to pitch to him, and that's all Cabrera can ask for. And, as George Kell used to say long time ago, Daniela, that Connie Mack, George Kell said this every broadcast. A Tiger batter would be up and, he'd swing and he'd foul the ball off. And, he'd say, Mr. Kaline, as the great old Connie Mack used to say, each bat, you get your pitch once and you better not foul it off. You better not miss it. You better hit that ball and drive it, and Miguel Cabrera is that type of hitter. When he gets that pitch, chances are he's not missing it. He's not fouling it off. He's getting a hit, and what's great because he'll do whatever the situation calls for too. Can he hit home runs? Maybe his power isn't there, but he can do that. But he can spray. He has great back control, hit to all fields. And so when you have a player like that and the guys that the Tigers have surrounded him with, the Tigers, I'm not going to say, hey, are they going to win the World Series? No. But things are going to fall into place where they could get better quickly. They could definitely be in the mix. And I think one of the things is especially with the guys that are in the 4, 5, and 6 hole is that they can hit for power.
Right, Art. That's kind of what I was going to follow it up with. If you've got Cron and Scope that can hit like they did last year, or even better would be great for the Tigers, then you've got a solid 3, 4, 5, and 6 right there in that lineup. And that's something that the Tigers really need.
Yeah, without question. I mean, obviously their power numbers last year were somewhat anemic, but right. Al Avila addressed it. He went out and got some people, and then again, and then depending on who they draft, and if they get Torkelson, the big power hitter from Arizona State, the big first baseman who's hit like zillions of home runs at the collegiate level. And if he can be fast tracked, again, you're going to hear me talk about Riley Green a lot, but I think that guy is potential superstar happening. And I know that I'm to, overdoing it at times, an exaggeration, but I'm not exaggerating with him. I mean, they could be in good shape. If they can get a break on a few players, as I said, and then some of their young arms coming together, they're going to be attractive. If the Tigers pitching staff, if these young arms come together, and I know they have to stay healthy and pitching is a really delicate thing to talk about, then that makes the Tigers attractive because players want to come here if you have great pitchers. I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to see the day of Verlander, Scherzer, Porcello, David Price. I mean, my gosh, but these young arms come together suddenly, even though you might long back to those days when that was a starting staff, this starting staff could come together rather quickly and rather nicely.
All right, let's take a look at the bottom of the batting order here. We've got spots 7, 8, and 9. Stewart, Romine, and Jones. I don't know if you want to say this is locked in, because I feel like the bottom of this order might be a little bit interchangeable. Is that the way you feel, Art, that, it might be reworked as the season goes on?
Well, certainly, obviously, injuries always play a factor, but if a guy's going through a slump, Christian Stewart, if he can, hopefully get it together a little bit and become a better outfielder, he can hit for power. Austin Romine it was looking for an opportunity to be a number one catcher. He's found that here in Detroit. He was very impressive, as Dan Dickerson told us, a couple of on Tuesday's show that, hey, look, the pitchers have embraced him, and so have the everyday ball players. And Jacoby Jones is really, really interesting. I remember the Tigers acquired him from the Pittsburgh. I was going to say Penguins, but for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And when they got him for the Pirates, he was a guy that was a really well thought of in their organization. And so when he came here, I think Jacoby Jones, he's a wonderful outfielder, great at center field. He could make Sports Center highlights every night with the catches that he makes. He has some power. He seems to be developing into a hitter. If he develops into a more consistent hitter, he's not going to be in the number 9 hole for very long. Let's put it that way. So, they do have some young ball players. It's starting to come together. I think 1 through 9, this lineup is a lineup that when they're all on their game can hit for power, as I said, and, score some runs. And, obviously, as great as you need pitching, you have to score some runs to win. And this lineup, as compared to especially last year's lineup, I think that this lineup looks like, it's going to have some pop in it.
Definitely, Art. I think that lineup should bring some excitement to the Detroit fans and get you ready for some baseball, right?
I am ready for, heck, if I'm looking for the NFL draft tonight, I'm ready for baseball. Trust me. I mean, I'm going to sit there and watch it and be on the edge of my seat. And usually this is how I watch the NFL draft. I'm interested to see, who, how the Lions, who are they going to pick this time? But I always go on guys that are either from the state of Michigan, University of Michigan football players, or something like that. I'm eager to see where the guys that I followed in college, not only Michigan State, Central, Western, all those guys, Grand Valley State, Ferris, if they have a player or two. I always kind of look at it that way. I'm interested to see where they all go. But nothing beats competition. The quicker that the Tigers and Red Wings and Pistons can get back on their fields of play, I'm going to be one happy man.
Yeah, we're all ready for it, Art. And I want to thank our friends at McLaren for bringing us this Brush Street Beat segment. Great segment. And thank you to our friends at McLaren, especially our healthcare workers. We want to give an extra thank you to them. And now Art is going to give you our headliner interview. This one was really great. And this headliner interview is presented by Miller Lite.
Welcome back to the Word on Woodward, and it's time now for the headliner segment presented by Miller Lite. And let's bring in a longtime friend of mine, one of my best friends, one of the most decent people I know, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But the television voice of the Detroit Tigers, Matt Shepard. I first want to ask you is, I'm glad the family is safe and sound and everybody doing well. He has his children are all like prodigies in some sort of field and all that kind of stuff. I know you and Lisa have to be proud of your family. Just great kids. No, it's true. Look at him. He's like, but it's true. But okay, you're in Florida. You're watching the Tigers, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm pretty, Riley Green looks good. We have maybe some young pitchers. You sort of see a semblance of this rebuilding starting to take shape. That there's an actual core and there's a team here, and then all of a sudden it ends. What were you doing? Did you get a sign that it was going to be canceled? How did that all play out for you?
We had a broadcast on a Tuesday on Fox Sports Detroit, and I always like to stick around at least another day to watch another game or practice on the backfields if the big league squad is somewhere else, if they're on a road spring training game. So I was able to do that on Wednesday, and then I took a late flight Thursday because I noticed that the Tigers were playing the Braves there at Joker Marchant Stadium, and I wanted to watch part of that too. I like watching different teams. I like comparing Detroit's youth with some of those, and I like sticking around the complex because, as you know, Art, with the Red Wings, that's how you get to know players. So when you're up in Traverse City, you're always talking to some of the younger guys who may be destined for Grand Rapids, but it gives you a better feel. It gives you a better idea of who those players are, what they can do, and they get to know you too. And I think that's really important. So that was my line of thinking, to stick around for Thursday to watch part of the Tigers and Braves. And I don't know if it was the 4th or 5th inning or so that we were talking in the press box there at the stadium, where we started to wonder if they were going to get through this game, and then how long of a delay was going to be spring training the rest of the way. And it started to filter through. I had to leave, and by the time I think I got to the Tampa airport, everybody had decided and knew that the Tigers were going to have, like everybody else in baseball, suspend their spring training.
You know, one thing I think that a lot of sports fans have done, and Fox is doing a great job. I know the Wings and Tigers are also streaming classic games, and I remember watching the game of the World Series of 1968, and I'm old enough to the 68 Tigers are still my team, and my mother, and a lot of people don't know this, and a lot of the people I work with the Red Wings, who are younger than me, World Series games were in the afternoon. There were no night games back then. In this game, Game 7 of a World Series between the Tigers and Cardinals, Bob Gibson versus Mickey Lolich, was in the afternoon, and my mom let me stay home from school. And the thing I remember about that, not only the Tigers winning, was that I live in Livonia, right off of Middle Belt, and that's a direct route to Metro Airport. And when the Tigers won, Middle Belt was packed from Livonia all the way to Romulus, with people honking their horns to greet the Tigers, at Metro Airport. And they ended up flying to City because there was too many people. A City Airport.
Wow,
maybe
I didn't know that.
But it was crazy. It was absolutely bedlam and crazy. Watching those games, it just makes you really appreciate it. You get to see, and many of them, unfortunately, have passed away. The great Al Kaline, Jimmy Northrup, who I love, Dick McAuliffe in that stance. I mean, watching these classic games are really kind of a pick-me-up during these, uncertain times.
Oh, I'm with you. I love every second of it. I mean, and Fox Sports Detroit got a really good rating for that. Remember that game in Game 7, Art, I think it was 2 hours and 17 minutes. That's how long it took to play that game. Game 6, which was a 13-1 blowout for the Tigers, took 2 hours, I think, and 37 minutes. That's how quickly they got through it. But you and I could name every one of those players. 68 was your team. 84 was my team. Fox Sports Detroit has not only aired that 68 game, and then later on they also did the remembering of Tiger Stadium. Tiger Stadium will remember. They had the Al Kaline special as well that I thought was fabulously done. But we've had the 1984 World Series recently. They've also done the Red Wings and the Stanley Cups. You and I were both at Joe Louis Arena for those. And then you reflect back, Art, and you see how special it really was during that long stretch in Detroit to see all those great teams, all those great athletes, and share that common bond with people. It was a discussion starter. You could go into a bar, you could go into a restaurant, you could go into a party and just start talking about that specific team or that era, and people jump all over. And people are going crazy right now for this classic stuff. And I think it says two things. A, how much we want to see sports and how that brings us back to normalcy. And I think, two, I think it also shows you what a great sports town this truly is. You and I have said that forever. Since I've known you, it's the greatest sports town in America. And we just love our athletes and we love our teams. And those teams are always special and they'll always be special to us. For me, I'm fortunate because, I've got kids and I can experience a lot of sports memories with them. But a lot of them were just stories. Even my 27-year-old son, all he did was hear about me telling him stories of how my favorite player ever, Alan Trammell, and how smooth he was and how good he was and how great the 84 team was. He's watching that classic Game 1 and Game 3 recently. And he's calling me the next day and he's saying, Dad, you're right, man. Absolutely. I can't wait for the Tigers to get my Alan Trammell. He loves that team. There's a bond there, right? You look back at the 97 and 98 Red Wings and the storylines. And for us to be able to share those with a new generation, all they could do before was watch YouTube highlights. All they could do before was read about it and see pictures and hear stories from us. Well, guess what? Now they can say they watched that game if they took the time, and they can recognize that Alan Trammell was as good as anybody else who played during that era. 1984, when the Tigers won the World Series, and then when Trammell and Morris were inducted into the Hall of Fame, I cried. My buddies cried. We called one another. Our validation of those teams, how we felt they were so great, even though they were passed over because of the Yankees and teams like that. And we kept screaming from the mountaintops, hey, the third team in history to go wire to wire, to see what those guys were able to do. I'll never forget that stuff. And to be able to share it with my children now through those sports classics on Fox Sports Detroit makes it even that much more special. I just hope we continue to hang on to those.
I want to go, I guess, to this year's Tiger Club because I'm eager to see it. When you looked at it, what were your impressions of spring training? A guy like Riley Green, some of the young guys. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm encouraged by what I saw of the Tigers this year. Granted, it's going to take a little bit a while, but there does look like a semblance of a core and as a team, as I said earlier.
Well, here's what we have to keep in mind, and I've said this during our broadcast a number of times. What Al Avila inherited and how you had to rebuild, not just the Tigers art. You're trying to rebuild an A-ball team in Lakeland, and West Michigan. You're trying to rebuild an Erie team in AA and Toledo in AAA. So when people want that turnaround to happen quickly, it's difficult. It's really challenging, and it takes time in baseball, perhaps more than any other sport. But I really like Riley Green. I said this when I saw him a year ago in talking with scouts and talking with people. I called him a fast tracker. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get them as many at-bats, have as many experiences as you possibly can, so by the time they're ready for next spring training, that they can take that jump. I don't know how much this is going to be detrimental for a guy like Riley Green, for a guy like Cody Clemens, for a guy like Parker Meadows. But long range, there's a really bright future because it's not just arms. They've got some pretty good players. And then when you get this draft, Art, and you got that number 1 overall pick at each of those rounds, you're going to get some pretty good players. There's no question about it.
Miguel Cabrera looks like a different player. He's lost some weight. I know the last couple of years he struggled with some injuries. I still think that he is one of the best hitters in baseball when he's going. I mean, heck, a bad hitter, he's like, 280 or something. And that's still a pretty good hitter the last couple of seasons. But what were your impressions of Cabrera down in spring training?
Well, you used to tell me he was a must-watch TV for you when you and I worked together, and I agree with you, and I think he will be again. I don't think he'll have the power numbers that he used to have. I don't expect 30 home runs and 120 RBIs, but what was most encouraging for me, Art, watching him down in Lakeland, was he was going the other way with power, and he was going straight away center with power. The thing that amazes me about watching him in the batting cage, it's one of my favorite things to do, is stand around the batting cage, talk with Lloyd McClendon, talk with Phil Clark, talk with Joe Vavra, the new hitting coach, and say, hey, watch him go to right field. He does it on his first batting session every single time. Every pitch to right, every pitch to right. That's how he teaches a lot of the younger players, and then they start doing the same thing to use all fields. I was amazed at how he continues to be so consistent in that regard. I know it's different in a game, but if his knee is healthy and he can turn and he can generate that power from the backside, I think he's going to have a much bigger year. And it's going to help that he's got a guy like C.J. Cron and Jonathan Scope to hit behind him and add some punch into that lineup that is much needed.
When you look at the Tigers, their starting rotation, if Jordan Zimmerman can stay healthy, obviously Matt Boyd, Daniel Norris, if he can stay healthy too. I mean, encouraging. I mean, when that trade was first made, Daniel Norris was supposed to be the big get in that deal, and Matt Boyd also, and Matt Boyd obviously a great pitcher. Norris can do it. They've got Ivan Nova, and I love Turnbull. I just like that kid. And then if Fulmer can come back, I mean, the pitching staff seems to be shaping up at the major league level. And then, of course, all those young arms like Casey Mize, Matt Manning, Tariq Skubal. I mean, so in pitching is the key, as we know. Again, not to sound too redundant here, but the Tigers don't look maybe as some of the pundits are saying quite as uncompetitive, if you will.
Well, they're better than they were a year ago. That doesn't mean that you and I think they're going to win the division because their talent isn't there yet. But I think what this pandemic has really hurt is Detroit's opportunity. You mentioned Michael Fulmer. He comes back in late June or July. He gives you another starter you hope you could throw into that rotation, all things considered, and it makes, possible valuable trading piece somewhere else. Look, Matthew Boyd's a hell of a leader, Art. He's soft-spoken, but when he does speak, people listen. He goes about his business as professional as any athlete I've ever seen. He's really helped Spencer Turnbull. And I think the shortened spring training has hurt a number of players, but especially Spencer Turnbull, because he may have been, outside of Tarek Skubal and Casey Mize, the most impressive Tigers pitcher in Lakeland. So you're going to need guys like Matthew Boyd and Spencer Turnbull to carry some major loads, and both of them told me in Lakeland they're ready to do that.
Who could be maybe, as you said, a fast tracker, maybe some of the surprises that we should look forward to once the baseball season begins for the Tigers?
Yeah, well, here's the hard part. Because of the cancellation of spring training, and you'd have to come back and get another at least 3 weeks down in Florida before you began the season. And because we don't know how many games they would play. So, for example, I was under the belief, Art, and I truly thought that you would see Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal at some point this summer. I thought you'd see them in July or August at some point, depending on what happens with the pitching staff. But we all know you can never have enough pitchers. If they pitched the way they did a year ago in AAA like they did in AA, then you are going to see them at some point at Comerica Park. You are going to see a guy like Willie Castro at some point at Comerica Park. I don't know if you can say that now, because you're not getting enough at-bats and enough innings from those guys, and the Tigers feel there is no need to rush them, and I concur with that. So is there going to be a surprise? I don't know if there's going to be a surprise, because I'll tell you what would be a great surprise for me is if Kristen Stewart was really solid in left field defensively. That would be a very encouraging sign for all Tigers fans. If Jacoby Jones could stay healthy all season long, that would be great. It would be wonderful if Nico Goodrum could be your everyday shortstop, stay there and help you. It would be great if Jonathan Scope could go back to his all-star campaign when he was with Baltimore and do a nice job fielding the second base position. And you mentioned Jamer Candelario earlier. It'd be great if somebody locked up that third base spot. I don't know if I can say there's a surprise. I can tell you this. What impressed me most in Lakeland is the leadership that Austin Romine showed. Here's a guy who's never been an everyday catcher, signs with Detroit for a one-year deal because he's going to get that opportunity. And he showed everybody early on now, I get it, but it was still spring training, the amount of respect people had for him so quickly, both pitchers and position players, I thought was really impressive.
I'd like to thank Matt Shepard, the television voice of the Detroit Tigers, for joining us here on The Headliner, brought to you by Miller Lite. And we'll be back with more from the Word on Woodward. Wow.
Another big thank you to Matt Shepard for joining us for the Headliner interview presented by Miller Lite. Miller Lite, the original light beer with great taste and only 96 calories, available for delivery. Art, I feel like you and Matt Shepard could talk for hours. That was a great interview. And I know you guys have some history, not only as coworkers and colleagues and, just sports industry workers, but you guys are also friends, right?
Yeah, I've known Matt a long time. This is a real tough business, as any business is. It's really competitive. And, we've all, Matt, we've experienced ups and downs. And, when I was in some down periods, Matt was always there for me, giving me, throwing work my way and checking up on me, and vice versa. I did the same for him. So it doesn't get much better as a genuine person and as a man than Matt Shepard. And the testament, his lovely wife and his children. His son Chad is one of the SIDs at Michigan in football, and I could go on and on and on. Another son is a very talented world-class musician. And again, I hate to start doing that. I don't want to embarrass, Backus, but he's just a great guy, and always been there for me, and vice versa, as I said. I was so happy when he became the voice of the Tigers, much like I was many years ago when Kenny Cal got the radio gig with the Red Wings. These are both gentlemen that I've known a long time. They're friends of mine. They work hard. They're the ultimate professionals, and to have good things happen to good people, it kind of reaffirms my belief in in mankind, I guess, to get really totally philosophical. But that's one of the best. Obviously, Ken is, and Double D, you're still my number one. So.
It was a great interview, Art. And before we get into Let's Socialize presented by AAA, I'm going to break some news here. I don't even know if you know this yet, Art, but Fox Sports Detroit is going to have a Facebook live chat, and they're going to be joined by Scotty Bowman and Barry Smith at 7:30. They're going to join Ken and Mickey before the 98 Game 3 Stanley Cup Final re-air. So how exciting is that? I know you'll be tuning in.
Well, that is very exciting. And all I can say is that as soon as you ask Scotty a question, that's it. He'll take the rest of the time. and the thing that'll be great, exactly. That's why we get along so well, I guess. Following Scotty's train of thought is always going to be fun too. So I'm looking forward to that. And then you throw in Barry into the mix. Oh my gosh, that is just going to be what a half hour or whatever. That is just going to be a lot of fun. I mean, Scotty. Again, I owe a lot to Scotty Bowman, and I believe that he is, without question, the best coach in sports history. I know, I was a big Vince Lombardi fan. I remember him. I love John Wooden. I read all his books, those UCLA teams, but no one is better as far as being a coach than Scotty Bowman. He is the best coach, regardless of sport, bar none. So fans are in for a real treat tonight with that Facebook live chat on Fox Sports Detroit. Way to go. Kudos or kudos, whatever that word is, for the live chat.
Oh, man. And I'm sorry, Art, I may have misinformed you there, but it's actually tomorrow night at 7:30. So that's going to be tomorrow night at 7:30 before the Stanley Cup final game. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait a day. I apologize for that.
I'm going to have to call Scotty now and chat to him. I'm jonesing for the guy now.
Yeah, now you have time to prepare. It's time to get into Let's Socialize, everybody, presented by AAA. And we're going to bring back Carly Johnston, who has been the queen of social media for us during this show. Carly, what are you finding out there?
Oh, lots of questions, and Art, you never cease to crack me up. All right, so we are going to get started with the questions from you fans. With Art, I have the first question. Is for you. Jim Cavender on Facebook wants to know, Michael Rasmussen has been spending this season in Grand Rapids playing center. Can he update us on his progress and what his chances are at making the Red Wings as a center next year? So, Art, this question is for you. Take it away.
Well, Michael Rasmussen, as we know, he spent all of last year in Detroit because he would have had to go back to his junior team. The Tri-City Americans, located, I believe, in Spokane, Washington. So the Red Wings opted to let him learn at this level. I think the reasoning behind that is what more can he learn? He was a dominant guy at, for the Tri-City Americans. He was just great. So let him learn at this level. And I think Michael Rasmussen wants to be a center. So I think when he went down there, he embraced that role. He is, I call him the most serious. I guess now he's 20. The most serious 20-year-old in the entire world. And I think because of that, he went down there. He knew what he had to do. He started off really, really well. I think he had something like 18 points in 25 games, and then he got a back injury, which set him back. So I think he's progressed well. Center is what he wants to do. I think it's his position. I think the Red Wings are looking at him as far as being a third line center and on the and one on the top power play units as a net front presence. He can be a shutdown guy. He can also score his goals. His net front presence, his hand-eye coordination. I've talked about this. When the Red Wings, when he was drafted, they had development camp. It was the last year that was in Traverse City before they moved it down to the Belfort Training Center at Little Caesars Arena. And with that happening, I just think that I saw him, Keith Petruzzelli, who was also drafted the same year. Keith Petruzzelli was in net, and Rasmussen was in front of the net. And I don't know who was shooting, coaches perhaps or somebody, but they were at the points shooting pucks on the net. Michael Rasmussen, and I counted this, he tipped in 99 out of 100 pucks into the net. I mean, his hand-eye coordination is that way. I remember talking to Craig Button about it too. It's just saying, he's 6'6", his stick, his reach, you can't defend that. And he does have that hand-eye coordination. So to answer your question, I think he's going to make the team next year. They need a center. He's big, he's disciplined, he will do whatever it takes. If there's anybody in the Red Wing organization, and they all want it, and they all want it badly, but Michael Rasmussen is without question one of those guys. I'm a big fan of his. He's progressed well. He was set back by the injury. When he came back, he still had to play a little bit, but he was starting to find his game when the season was put on pause. So I think Rasmussen is going to be that big two-way shutdown center with a definitely offensive upside, especially on the power play, net front. Absolutely outstanding.
Love it. Well, we're hoping to see him in a season. You covered, I think, all grounds. That was perfect. All right, Daniela, this is for you. Paul Evans on Facebook asked, assuming the league figures it out and starts back up for the Cup final, who do you feel will come out of the East and the West, and who wins it all?
This is a tough question, and I'm going to make this answer quick for you, Carly, because I know we have a really cool video from the Tigers that we have to get to. From the West, I think that it's going to be Colorado that comes out. I think they've been the strongest team throughout the entire season here so far, at least. And I think Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Andre Burakovsky, great team there. And then Cale Makar, did you really think that he was going to come out and be the player that he is this season? I just think they're stacked, and I think that they're definitely going to come out. And I hate to say this for the East. I'm sorry, Red Wings fans, but I think the Boston Bruins are going to come out on top and make it to the Stanley Cup final. Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak, great players. They've been playing super well all season. Another team that's been solid throughout, even though the Red Wings beat them twice this season. I do have to throw that in there. But I do think that's going to be the Stanley Cup final matchup. And ultimately, I think Colorado is going to take it.
You might get some hate mail for that, Daniela, but I really appreciate you being realistic.
I know.
And fans,
I'm getting hate mail all over the place today.
It's okay, Daniela. It's okay. We still love you. All right, fans, the Tigers are now releasing the virtual dream come true video on their YouTube, but it's an incredible video with such a heartfelt outcome, so check it out.
Tigers Dream Come True program has created memorable experiences for Tigers fans for many years, and today we are pleased to be joined by a lifelong loyal Tigers fans, George Dralas. George, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much.
So you mentioned Al Kaline and Willie Horton. Who are some of your other favorite Tigers of all time?
Jim Northrup, Mickey Stanley, but also Alan Trammell, Kurt Gibson, and Lance Parrish, Jack Morris, and Dan Petrie also.
Well, you mentioned Alan Trammell.
Yes.
And we just happened to have a guy in the virtual waiting room who would love to join the call and say hello.
Oh, my goodness.
Good morning, George.
Good morning, Alan. It's what a blessing it is to see you. You're such a great person, and we're a great player, and congratulations on the Hall of Fame. I'm so excited for you. Watching you guys just all get together, be teammates, help each other, build each other up, give each other confidence. It was so wonderful, and it helped me through playing baseball as a kid, and when I grew up, it helped me. I worked at General Motors for 36 years as a manager, and being a teammate at General Motors, you guys taught me all that. And believe me, Alan, it was just a true pleasure to watch you playing and be part of the team. And just you were unbelievable. You're just a true blessing to be a Tiger. Thank you so much.
I heard that you tried out for the Tigers, but what position did you play?
I played I played third base a lot, but I also played right and left field. But when I tried out in Battle Creek, and then when I went down to Toledo. It wasn't, I didn't get drafted, but I was invited to go down. I tried out at third base at that time in Toledo, and then in Battle Creek, it was both the outfield and the infield.
Hopefully we can do this in person at some point later this year. That would be ideal. I hope that let's take a rain check on that, and when things get back again better, let's make that a date.
Oh, I would love that. That would be true blessing. Thank you. That would be awesome.
Wow, I don't know about you guys, but that was definitely a tearjerker. What an incredible moment. If you guys want to head on over to the Tigers YouTube and watch it again, because I know I will be watching it again and sharing it, go ahead. It's on their YouTube channel for now. You guys, back to you. I mean, that was such an incredible video.
Thank you so much for joining us, Carly. And yes, I did tear up too. That was the first time I've seen that video. That was so amazing of the Tigers to do for him. I loved it. And you brought us some great content today, Carly. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
This segment was presented by our friends at AAA. AAA says thank you with free roadside assistance for first responders and healthcare workers fighting to defeat COVID-19. You protect us by going to work every day. Let AAA protect you on the way there and back. All right. We're coming down to the final minutes of the show again. I can't believe how fast 2 hours goes when I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I can't believe it either. I mean, that video we just saw, I mean, the power of sports, what sports means, and Alan Trammell there, and I mean, it was great. I truly enjoyed that. I want to go real quickly though. I just want to say that I think that the Vegas Golden Knights are coming out of the West because of Marc-Andre Fleury, and I actually think because he's going to be well rested and he's still a great player, and Detroit fans are really going to end up hating me. I think it's going to come down to Vegas and Pittsburgh for the Stanley Cup, and I think Vegas wins it all. But I just wanted to get that in there. You spurred my interest there, Danielle. Although you can't go wrong with your two picks either.
I just think they're both playing so well in the Avs. I really thought they were going to make it farther last season, so I think that they got the itch to get there, and I think they're going to.
Well, Nathan McKinnon is one of the best players in the league. I couldn't agree with you. Cale Makar, what can you say about him? Team maybe not to sleep on is the Vancouver Canucks too. And I'm not just saying that because of Quinn Hughes, but that team has been rebuilt real quickly. That's a team that the Red Wing fans can point to and maybe think, well, this rebuild might not be quite as long as we thought. And, I probably should apologize to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know this is a very serious situation we're into, but I was just having a little fun by forcing them to go into the Utah Jazz locker room if unfortunately it won't be Little Caesars, but if that were the choice to host the tournament for the Atlantic Division, if that's the way the NHL goes.
Art, I'm sure they appreciate your apology there in Toronto and all throughout Canada. One thing I did want to say, though, before we close this out, I know we did pick our teams for the NHL playoffs there, but if and when we do get to the playoffs, we've been saying this all season long, that it is so close right now and that it's going to be a really interesting playoff once we get there.
Yeah, because you even though they're going to have a 3-week training camp, you don't know where these guys are. I mean, are half of these players just sitting around, can't get enough Tiger King? They're watching it. Joe Exotic. I mean, I'm obsessed with the guy. They're watching it over and over and over and over again. Or who knows? I mean, what exactly are they doing? They're human beings. You are given. Each team is giving them something to do. But are they sitting there? As the Red Wing general manager likes to say. Remember, I'm not going to be saying his name today. But the Red Wing general manager says, are they sitting on the couch eating bonbons, or are they, working out? So, who knows? That means a real dark horse candidate could come out of nowhere and win the Stanley Cup. Like the Florida Panthers or somebody that, is a good club, but you wouldn't see them maybe making it to the final. Depending on where all these players are and how they've taken care of themselves, who knows? It's wide open.
Well, Art, you mentioned Joe Exotic, and with you and all your cats that we discussed last time, I might have to start calling you Art Exotic. So that might be a new thing that's coming at you. I want to thank you guys so much for joining the Word on Woodward today. And again, tune into Hockeytown Trivia. It's starting right now, so make sure you pull out your phone, get to the District Detroit app. You don't want to miss out on the chance to win a really cool Red Wing swag bag. Again, that's on the District Detroit app. You'll see the Hockeytown Trivia banner. Thank you so much for tuning in. Art, as always, thank you. And we'll see you guys on Tuesday at noon.